In this series, I'm going to summarize my research on the history behind every Assassin's Creed game, including spin-offs like Chronicles, but I'm approaching each of these games in historical order. Thus, we're going to start with Odyssey and work our way up to the beginning of the 20th century when Chronicles Russia takes place. This might be fun. Who knows? Let's begin. Not only were Athens and Sparta independent city-states in ancient times, but both led alliances of cities. Sparta's allies consisted of cities across Peloponnese, which is basically the Sicily of Greece, and the mainland, including Corinth, whose navy rivaled the Athenians. Meanwhile, Athens enjoyed the height of its naval power as an ally of many coastal and island cities, from Marathon to Lesbos, which is where your mom comes from. This conflict endured for so long because it was so much more than a dispute between two cities. What you may already know by this point, I certainly did, is that the Spartans had the army and the Athenians had the navy. But also, because the Athenians weren't fascists, they earned plenty of money from taxing subjects. This may explain their upper hand during the early battles of the war. The First Peloponnesian War, from around 460 to 440 BCE, occurred primarily between Corinth and Athens, though Spartan aid reinforced the Corinthian effort occasionally. At first, the war was cold, in the sense that both Sparta and Athens took steps to ensure that the other wouldn't become too powerful. Due to Sparta's many allies surrounding Athens, Athenians boosted fortifications and continued to invest in their formidable navy. This intimidated the Spartans into action and so on, culminating in a series of peripheral skirmishes between Sparta and Athens. Instead of an epic battle at Thermopylae, the first part of the Peloponnesian War was a subtle conflict of nasty embargoes and sacking cities in the name of resources. Accordingly, when historians refer to the Peloponnesian War, they're often referring to the bloodier, more violent conflict from 430 through 400 BCE. As one might imagine, the Spartan fascists and Athenian democrats failed to see eye to eye long before this war. Initially, the two powers ended the first part of the war with the 30 Years' Peace in 445 BCE. This truce's name isn't a retroactive one historians use. The Greeks themselves sought 30 years of peace. The main stipulations of this truce were that Athens had to relinquish all property within Peloponnese to Sparta, neither side could gain or lose property during the truce, and neutral states were free to decide whether they wanted to side with either power. Not all stipulations were easily determinable, but most accounts suggest the truce was an official and comprehensive ceasefire that both sides intended to observe for 30 years. To both sides' credit, the 30 Years' Peace endured for 12 years, and to my surprise, the Spartans weren't entirely at fault. In 433, Athens allied with Corcyra, an island and Corinthian colony. Since Corinth was an ally of Sparta, the fascists blew everything out of proportion, and the Second Peloponnesian War began when the Spartan colony of Thebes retaliated by launching an attack on the Athenian colony of Plataea. Over the course of the latter half of the conflict, much of the fighting unfolded as it does in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Sparta and Athens were evenly matched enough to trap each other in a stalemate. Athens happened to suffer an adverse effect on morale due to a plague, but as nasty as the plague was, the Athenians weren't losing because of it. Sparta launched many attacks against Athenian fortresses and vessels in the early years of the war, but no assault rattled Athens significantly. Neither side achieved much apart from collecting casualties, civilian or otherwise. In fact, the Greek world had never seen so many casualties. After years of Spartans taking initiative, Athens took the offensive on, you'll never believe this, the Sicilian front. Indeed, Spartan colonies dotted Sicily at the time. Remember Syracuse from DreamWorks' Sinbad? That's in Sicily. Anyway, the Athenians were doing pretty well until a major Spartan victory in Chalkidiki caused several Athenian subject states to revolt against Athens. In the wake of this battle, the Athenians accepted the short Peace of Nicias, a series of diplomatic maneuvers and small military expeditions to nudge cities toward certain factions. Both Spartans and Athenians attempted to win over neutral states slowly and cunningly. Again, this is similar to the back and forth we see in Odyssey. What really tipped the scales was an all-or-nothing assault on Sicily staged by Athens in 415 BCE. With Spartan aid, Syracuse broke an entire Athenian blockade. Brutalized on land and in water, many Athenians never returned home. In Greece, Athenians continued to resist, rebuilding their navy and campaigning across the Aegean. But at the Battle of Aegospotami in 405 BCE, Sparta decimated the Athenian navy of all things and left Athens out to dry. By the way, those no-good evil Persians helped Sparta win. Athens finally surrendered the following year, essentially tapping out in response to a Spartan blockade. While the Peloponnesian War failed to see much change for decades, Sparta was indeed the winner. As you may recall from Odyssey's DLC, Alexios or Cassandra has a baby, that baby has a baby, and so on and so forth, until we end up with Aya, who marries our next destination's protagonist, Bayek of Siwa. The Roman occupation of Egypt didn't genuinely begin until after Bayek's involvement with Mark Antony and Cleopatra, when both members of the power couple died. Due in part to civil unrest within the Roman Empire, the iconic duo stood their ground against a Roman leader by the name of Octavian at the infamous Battle of Actium, infamous among historians. Shortly after Octavian defeated them, Mark Antony and Cleopatra unalived themselves around 30 BCE, marking the beginning of Rome's comprehensive annexation of Egypt as well as an integration of Egyptian and Roman culture. Roman architects ornamented their fora with obelisks, while Egyptian painters depicted their gods in a classical European style. Unlike Mark Antony, who viewed Rome's relationship with Egypt as more of a mutual partnership, Octavian presented himself as a replacement. He would do away with the very notion of a pharaoh, dismantle the entire Ptolemaic monarchy. Ptolemy XII himself was in the game, if memory serves, and even save spoils for himself, allocating Egyptian land to be part of his personal estate. From this point forward, Egypt's Roman name endured as Aegyptus. The assimilation of Aegyptus was so complete as to restrict local traditional art and ancient scripts to religious and funerary contexts within the first century of occupation. Romans felt no need to disrupt local goings-on among temples. It just so happens that most citizens spoke Latin and Greek on the street. Many were Greek, as we see in Origins. As with the Spanish occupation of Mexico and Central America over 1,000 years later, new social dynamics arose in Egypt with regard to race and geography. For instance, only Greek Alexandrians were eligible to become Roman citizens, which meant that, in the event of capital punishment, they could enjoy the privilege of being beheaded instead of crucified. Now, Romans were Christian at the time, and historians have credited Mark the Evangelist with bringing Christianity to Egypt. Egyptians were amenable to Christianity due to its similarities to local religion. In fact, Egyptian Christianity has endured as a subset of Christianity with unique practices. This annexation begs the question, didn't Egyptians rise up in defiance? Well, they didn't have much time to respond in the face of what was probably the first blitzkrieg ever. Octavian quickly delegated management of the land to governors who could more effectively depoliticize the country than he could alone, neutralizing disputes among Romans in high places without neglecting to placate sentiments of revolt among Egyptians. Countless Roman legions garrisoned in Egypt for around a decade after the beginning of the occupation, enforcing Roman law and treating Egypt as if it had already been part of Rome. A single legion could boast over 5,000 men, and Roman infantry was likely the best in the world at the time. With the blunt philosophy of total war, they didn't invite a whole lot of resistance. Egypt quickly became as valuable to Rome as other provinces had been, owing much prosperity to advanced irrigation systems, among other efficient agricultural practices. Much of the grain flowing to Rome flowed from Egypt. They all ate bread and got fat, just like me. Other artificial goods included papyrus, glass, textiles, and more. Across the desert, Romans could mine plenty of ore and minerals, especially granite and porphyry, the latter of which is purple. Also, the Romans taxed the ever-loving fuck out of the Egyptians, so that likely made some money too. Aegyptus remained among Rome's most valuable provinces for hundreds of years until the empire's dissolution. Rome profited so much from a thriving Egypt that an Instagram influencer by the name of Diodorus called Alexandria the first city of the civilized world. So I guess it's not Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Mainly, Alexandria earned this praise because of the library that burned down, and fancy eminent people wanted to go to the library. The occupation of Egypt ended only with the end of the empire. Egypt finally fell under Islamic rule in the 600s. The history of Egypt, and Egyptus in particular, were incredibly complex, and there were intermediate stages of ownership, but that last one was the nail in the coffin for the next couple hundred years. The next historical period brings us to one of my favorites in the series, Assassin's Creed Mirage. What fun it is to explore central Baghdad during the Islamic Golden Age. This Islamic Golden Age takes place between the 700s and 1200s. Basim ibn Ishaq's story coincides with the early stages of this time, specifically occurring during the anarchy at Samarra, a rough decade, 860 to 870, that witnessed an unstable succession of several caliphs who were little beyond puppets of competing military factions in the area. What's kind of cute is that in the game, Nehal ushered in this period of unrest by being the one to kill al-Mutawakkil. During this golden age, the Arab Muslim Empire thrived under the rule of Islamic leaders as one of the largest empires in history. Distinct from a true empire with a centralized government, the Arab Muslim Empire refers to a group of states and regions in which citizens practiced Islam. Each state was governed by a caliphate. Major caliphates often supplanted each other, but some existed side by side. As the world's most advanced city of the time, Baghdad was at the heart of this powerful empire, owing much of its importance to its House of Wisdom. The House of Wisdom was similar to a college, if the game is any indication. Basim crashes symposia and peruses libraries for books. In Mirage, there's actually a scene at the college where players can see an ancient citizen's drawing of a double helix 1,000 years before Watson and Crick were born. So how's that for advanced? The House of Wisdom reflected a larger effort of artisans and professionals across the Islamic world to preserve earlier traditions without neglecting to innovate and invent. As perfect a space it was for compiling and recording as much existing knowledge as possible, it presented plenty of opportunities for intellectuals to cooperate in the interest of discovering new information or creating new inventions. Speaking of compiling a ton of information, one of the major innovations of the Islamic Golden Age was paper, that is distinct from papyrus. As many might guess, paper is among countless inventions originating in China, but its recipe was a close secret that Muslims happened to extract from Chinese prisoners of war and make more readily available across the empire. With new writing tools, the House of Wisdom's scribes translated ancient texts from defunct languages to Arabic, Turkish, Latin, Hebrew, and more. These texts came from all over the world: Rome, China, India, Egypt, Greece, Byzantium, Mesopotamia, and Persia. Citizens also came from far and wide to trade ideas and goods in Baghdad. A black man, a Chinese man, and a Greek don't start an unsavory joke. Rather, they paint an accurate picture of a vibrant marketplace in the ancient Islamic world. That Islam has endured as the most popular religion on the planet is no surprise, and neither is Basim's ultimate journey from Baghdad to England in Valhalla. The Islamic Golden Age was a time of advancement and innovation, but it was also a time during which discourse could thrive. Not only did the people of Baghdad and other metropolitan areas across the empire prize free speech, but they encouraged each other to resolve disagreements through thoughtful debate. As they were masterful calligraphers, I guess words meant a lot to them. The topics of discourse ranged from love and poetry to ethics and even the environment. That's right, over 1,000 years ago, residents of bustling Baghdad expressed concern over extravagant lifestyles, pollution, and resource mismanagement. One fun fact about the Islamic Golden Age that has nothing to do with Baghdad, I still found it interesting, is that Mecca was also an important city in terms of advancement. The pilgrimage to Mecca is a divine commandment among Muslims. All must visit at least once in their lives. Thus, this city thrived as a trade center. Attracting citizens from across the empire, Mecca was the perfect place to exchange ideas and goods alike. The wealth of the Arab Muslim Empire was determined by merchants rather than a handful of elites. Between innovations across all disciplines, from physics to agriculture, and a firm commitment to liberalism, everything in the empire was going swimmingly until the 13th century. What happened in the 13th century? Mongolia happened. Hulagu Khan, one of Genghis Khan's many descendants, leveled the city and ran off with the loot. Of course, Baghdad eventually recovered and endured into modern times. Being the cultural hub of the entire world is much more difficult nowadays than it was 1,000 years ago, but otherwise, the Baghdad of today is similar to many other national capitals across the globe. Museums, restaurants, universities, government buildings, dog parks, and probably a mosque. After enjoying a productive career as a master assassin of the Iraqi Brotherhood, Basim ventures to England in search of a piece of Eden, if memory serves. There, he teams up with a clan of Vikings to complete his search. Centuries after the dissolution of the Roman Empire, the Kingdom of England was full of self-sufficient monasteries that earned well through artisanal goods, like cheese and beer. Invading Vikings from Scandinavia knew this, so kings sent soldiers to protect the treasuries of these monasteries. The age during which Vikings terrorized England, as well as the northern coast of Europe from France through Poland, is generally considered by historians to take place between the years 800 and 1000. Thus, Valhalla occurs near the beginning of this golden age, the game's narrative addressing a need among members of Eivor's clan to pursue a better life overseas. Why did Vikings turn to raiding? Overpopulation was part of the issue. Practically speaking, there wasn't a literal shortage of space, but territorial factions felt like Scandinavia wasn't big enough for everyone. Furthermore, because so few defenses protected territory along the European coast, Vikings also saw an opportunity. Under the guidance of brilliant tacticians, Vikings directed a seemingly endless supply of manpower at towns and villages across coastal Europe. As Vikings were much more organized and disciplined than their violence suggested, their extraction of wealth from target cities was complete, destructive, and bloody. Thus, they earned the title Vikinger, or pirate, in multiple Scandinavian languages. With regard to England in particular, pillaging efforts were initially more casual and less organized. The few Vikings who came to England raided sparingly in the interest of critical resources. Mirroring Eivor's journey across England, Vikings gradually annexed more and more of the country until a sizable portion of it remained under Viking control for a few decades. By around 1000, England had reobtained such territories, but aspects of Scandinavian social structure, dialect, and personal names endured to the modern day in certain areas where Vikings had settled. While there may be no evidence of a superior precursor race, you can sure as shit plan a trip to Ravensthorpe today if you live in the London metropolitan area. Contrary to popular belief, the French didn't acquiesce the way England did. Vikings raided much more occasionally, such that no more than a handful of Viking settlements dotted the Seine. This may be why some of Valhalla's DLC brought us to the greater region beyond Paris. My favorite part of the DLC was when French people said "Deliverance" as often as possible. There was a bit of a front over in Eastern Europe, though raids were sporadic and most Viking activity was restricted to peaceful assimilation with peoples in the Baltic states and Russia. Those who didn't engage in raiding were simply absorbed by existing Slavic peoples. While Vikings lived across much of Europe during their expeditions, enough of them remained in Denmark for historians to consider the country under Viking rule. As Vikings abandoned Norway, they also abandoned some of their own pantheon in favor of Christianity. Excavating crypts, archaeologists have found evidence of Nordic as well as Christian rituals. Earning their mantle as the first modern Europeans, Vikings settled all over the Atlantic, from the Faroe Islands and the Isle of Man to Greenland and Iceland. Some even attempted to colonize the Americas, as many of you may already know. That the game takes 300 hours to complete is no surprise. That's all for Layla Hassan's main story. In the next video, we'll start to tackle the original trilogy, discussing the lives of Altair ibn La'ahad and Ezio Auditore.